For folks online, you'll have your choice again. And in this room, I'd like to ask folks to join me in welcoming Caroline Sparks, who's going to present on resilient recreation, health, and well-being. It's yours.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. How are you doing after lunch? Oh, did you have some of that dessert? Did that sort of pick you up a little bit? Yes? Okay. Well, thank you. It's lovely to be here. Thank you very much. My name is Caroline Sparks, and I'm here today on behalf of the Recreation and Parks Association of the Yukon, so a territorial organization. I've been in the field of active living, recreation, and sport for quite a long time. I won't tell you how long because that'll give away my age, but anyways. And I'm really fortunate, I'm blessed to actually be able to live and work from the traditional territories of the Kwanlin Dun First Nation and Tonquachin Council. So really, really appreciate that. I'd like to begin my presentation today by introducing you to RPAY. You might hear me say that. It's a lot shorter than saying the Recreation and Parks Association of the Yukon. And you might be wondering what role RPAY has in a health forum, or a health summit, and I'll share a little bit of that with you as well. From there, what I'll do is I'll explain a little bit about the research that we were involved in and how that leads to an understanding of what we need to do moving forward with recreation in our communities, especially in our rural communities. Can I just see a raise of hands? How many people are from representing rural Yukon, like outside of Whitehorse here? A few people, or representing all of the Yukon maybe, perhaps, through your work. Okay, that's great. That's good to know. Thank you. So let me start with introducing you to, that works perfect. The button with no little logo on it, so that works great. I'd like to tell you a little bit about who RPAY is, because sometimes people think that RPAY is government or RPAY is the City of Whitehorse Recreation, but it's neither of those. RPAY is a nonprofit, and their goal, as you can see here, is to support Yukon communities to get their citizens, their residents, engaged in active, healthy lifestyles through recreation and parks. And RPAY carries out their mandate through 3 strategic goals, which I'll explain a bit more later, but really about promoting the benefits of an active, healthy lifestyle, which I'm sure you all believe in because you're all here today. Supporting opportunities to participate in recreation through a number of key programs that you may have noticed if you watched the video that we showed at lunch or the film, and also strengthening leadership and capacity for recreation, because recreation doesn't happen without people stepping up and taking that initiative to make it happen in their communities. So RPAY's offices are based in Whitehorse, but almost all, last year, 70% of all the programs that they did happened outside of Whitehorse in rural communities. So really big focus on rural communities. So you might all know that there's benefits to recreation. It's really important to share those because sometimes we forget recreation's a really positive, fun thing that you get to do. It's not about work necessarily unless you're working in it. And there's lots of really great benefits from recreation. Over the past century since public recreation or community recreation came about, it was really regarded as a public good for some of these reasons. And we all know, and I'm sure you do too, that recreation is really great for your own health, your physical health, your mental health, and also for social well-being. So you might have heard the saying that a family that plays together stays together. In communities, if people have access to welcoming, affordable, and meaningful recreation, it strengthens their relationships in the community and it brings people closer together and they work together better. And that social connection is really good for our health and well-being. And I know I'm preaching to people who are probably already believe that, so. The challenge with recreation, though, and if you're not in the field, you might not be aware of this, but over the past 30 years, there's been a lot of shifts in how we do recreation. It's shifted towards more of things are expensive, so we have to charge more for them. People want to go to a place, so we have to build facilities that people go to. It can be challenging, and when the pandemic hit, we were able to do some research to see what happens when people don't have access or to things like their swimming pool or their arena or even their community hall. So it was really interesting to learn what happens when we change what recreation looks like and what the potential of that is in our communities. So I'd like to take a moment just to share a little bit about a research project that we did. It was called Pandemic Impacts on Rural Recreation in the Yukon Territory, or PIRR for short. And the project was funded through the Government of Yukon, the COVID-19 Recovery Research Program. And I think there were a few other people here who were involved in that too. And we were so fortunate, we worked with the World Leisure Centre of Excellence at Vancouver Island University, and they helped us carry out this research because RPA is not a research organization, they're a recreation organization. The design that was put into place was a participatory rural appraisal approach, and we were looking to answer three really big questions. So how did the pandemic impact how people participated in recreation? In what ways did people providing recreation have to change what they did because of the restrictions that were put in place? And how, this to me is the last question, is the most important. How can recreation help us move forward, help us recover, not just from the pandemic, but when we have tough times, which we all know we have. They come and go, but we do have tough times. So we were really lucky. We learned a lot from the experiences that were shared by individuals who lived in these 5 rural communities. And there's a final report and also individual community reports. So if you work with one of these communities and you'd like to see what that report shared, I've got a link later on that you can keep so that you can access the reports. So let's find out what we learned. So really, what did we learn about how the pandemic impacted recreation? And that was important because if you think recreation contributes to health and well-being, the pandemic might have taken something away from that. So we learned that the public health restrictions were probably a huge factor, and they limited people's ability to come together, and they led to the closure of public facilities. So in some communities, like Tagish, for example, their community hall was closed right till the end of the pandemic, until the restrictions were lifted. And that's their public gathering space in their community. So it was quite hard for some communities. And although different communities experience the restrictions differently, the way it worked with sport and recreation is everybody had to put in their own plan, and so it was approved or not approved. So every community had something a little different. But it didn't matter what those restrictions were. Every single person we talked to talked about the negative effects of programming being canceled and facilities being closed. And social isolation was something that everybody said they felt. You can imagine a community like Beaver Creek where it's got a really small population, and people in one family, their kids weren't able to go and play with their cousins who lived next door because of the restrictions. So even just that simple thing impacted people's experiences. On top of that, people who had chose not to be vaccinated identified even more feelings of being excluded from their communities, and they linked those to profound reductions in mental health and well-being. So what did we hear on the plus side? We heard that because of those public health restrictions, people turned to recreation that was outdoors. And I know outdoors on the land is a really important place for most Yukoners, but people went out even more than what they did before, both in summer and in winter. And communities that had outdoor infrastructure, like ice rinks, courts, trails, fields, they saw more people using those spaces. So Dawson City was one place during the pandemic. They put in a disc golf, they did an outdoor swimming pool, and those places got a lot of use and still do. So what did we come to understand from that? Well, what we've learned can help us move forward, not just from the pandemic, but it can also help us move forward in the future. Because in our communities, we're facing some really challenging times, especially with facilities. Facilities are really old, they're falling down, they're not always maintained. Some places can't even find staff to staff facilities, so swimming pools can't be open because of that. Recreation is really important because we need it when times are challenging, and it needs to be accessible to everybody, not just people who can afford to pay for it or who have transportation to get there. It's when it's available to everybody that it's better for social well-being and for health. So I've used the term resilient recreation. I know we use the term resilient quite a bit, but I've used it to kind of capture some things that we think moving forward might help. And so for recreation to be resilient, we really feel that it needs to be less structured. So you can go outside and you can go for a walk right now. You can go for a walk in an hour or in 2 hours. There's a trail there, maybe it's shoveled, and that gives you access to recreation that's unstructured. You do it on your own time, in your own way, at your own pace, and with whomever you would choose to do it with. And so our outdoor spaces really offer a huge opportunity. Beaver Creek is an example where they had an outdoor rink. They put a cover over it. Great, so they didn't have to shovel it as much. But then the birds came along in the summer and all roosted underneath the cover. So over the last year, they put bird netting around. Now they have a great facility and it didn't cost that much, and everybody can use it. And across the country, some communities are putting in fire pits. There's one outside here. Places where people can come and gather and be together, be active and be social in ways that are the most meaningful for them. And that's what I think resilient recreation really is. So our research project resulted in recommendations in 4 areas. I'm not going to dig into them because sometimes recommendations can be a little bit dry, but I just wanted to point out there's some for policy, so anybody who's perhaps with government or funders of recreation. There's one around places, which might speak to people who help design communities, help make decisions of which community gets the next recreation facility and what it looks like. There's things that speak to people. How do we get people back from people who chose to leave, say, aquatics or lifeguarding through the pandemic because they couldn't get their retraining? How do we build and invest in people? And how do we create programs that are lighter, that don't cost so much, that are easy for people to put children who are 4 and 12 in together, or easy for grandparents to participate with children? So I think it's really important that we think and we build on the strengths that we have and look at some of those things and really get those messages across. So we really do know that recreation's really important. The right to play is one of the children's rights. It's a fundamental right put out by the United Nations. Adults have the right to play as well. We all need to have that time where we can be active and spend time together and build the connections with people in our communities. But we need to do a couple of changes about how we do public or community recreation. So we need to shift the mindset towards types of community recreation that are more inclusive and accessible, and prioritize recreation infrastructure that isn't as expensive to build, maintain, or use. So for recreation to truly be resilient, it has to be accessible for families, working adults, or youth. It has to be welcoming for people who maybe don't have the money to go and pay an entrance fee or to buy expensive equipment. I was just talking to a youth yesterday from Kingite, which is Cape Dorset in Nunavut, and he said he saved up for a whole year for a pair of hockey skates and a helmet, and that was $700. So that's really hard, and other kids don't play because they can't afford that. So it's really important that we also make recreation affordable, and resilient recreation has to be affordable. And also, resilient recreation is intergenerational. It's really great for us to get our kids active after school, but if children in communities don't see active adults and active grandparents, how are they going to have any role models? So we need to be able to provide opportunities for everybody. And we need to make better use of what a community has, not what it doesn't have. I've worked in recreation for more than 30 years across the Yukon, and the number of times I've heard, we need a year-round swimming pool in a community is many, many times, or we need this. But communities like Dawson, they created a pool that they could use out of one of the old pits. Other communities have done like curling on the lake. So there's lots of ways to do it without spending a lot of money on infrastructure. So if we know all this, I think some of you might have seen the film about RPay at lunchtime. So this might be a little bit of a summary, but I just wanted to share a few ways in which the Recreation and Parks Association of the Yukon supports communities. Because if you're working in health and wellness in those communities, there might be something here that you think, oh, I could connect somebody with RPay. So RPay does a lot around promoting the benefits of recreation. You saw the recreation effect, but they also go out to communities and bring things like water bottles and walking kits and things like that, all for no cost. So if you have communities that you know are running groups or programs that they want a little support, a little swag that's always nice to have, you can reach out to RPay for that. RPay also will make presentations such as this one and come out to communities and support communities in the way that the communities want, because that's what's really important. A few of RPay's key programs support participation. So one is called REAL, which is Rural Healthy Eating, Active Living. And that program lets people in communities decide what's important to them and create a program and run it with RPay's support. That one, some groups in Whitehorse have access to that, but it's primarily for rural communities. RPay also offers what they call WAFL, or Winter Active for Life. There's an equipment library, and it has cross-country skis and snowshoes and kick sleds, and eligible groups can borrow that equipment. In the communities, you can borrow it for the whole winter season and run different programs. And kick sleds are a really great way for little kids and elders to enjoy getting outside. They also have a Cycle Smart program that runs in every single school in the Yukon, and teachers have told us that kids get more active, they're more likely to ride their bikes after they know how to do it safely. And then they have what's called an Active Play Experiences program that also runs in schools. So if you know of any teachers that are interested in developing leaders in young people ages like 10 to 12, they can become leaders and help younger kids have fun playing too. RPay has a Nordic walking training as well, so using poles for people who might have some mobility issues. And then the last area that RPay focuses on is training and professional development. I think most people here are probably familiar with how it's harder now to attract and retain staff and leaders than it was before the pandemic. And it's extra hard in small communities. It's really hard to get someone to come and run swimming lessons or run a yoga class or things like that. So RPay helps people build their ability to do that, their capacity, their skills, their certification, and it also provides support for people who are already working in recreation across the territory. So there's a number of different things here if you know of anybody that's interested. One last program I'll just mention is the Recreation North Training Program. And RPay was part of a partnership across all the 3 territories that was fortunate to become an Arctic Inspiration Prize laureate in 2015, so a long time ago. And with that, we were able to develop, and we continue to deliver, a training program for recreation leaders in, I think we've hit at least 70 communities. So when I mentioned I was talking to somebody from Kingite, it was through that training program. So it connects people and provides support, because it's not always possible to leave your community to go get training. So it helps them learn where they're at. So those are just a few of the things that RPay does. I'd like to invite you, or if you'd like to share with anyone that you work with, to connect with RPay, because we really do believe that recreation is important to health and well-being. And you can connect using either of those little scan things there. The one on the right gives you the link to where the report from the research is, and the other one will take you to ARPE's website. So thank you, merci, masicho, Kwanashish.
Thanks, Caroline. She's like, yeah, that'd be great. She's like the only just wait, they might have questions. The only presenter where I hold up the 5-minute wraps up in 2. It's great. You saw Mathia try and squeeze in a Slido and try and squeeze in all these other things afterwards, so I appreciate that, Caroline. Just want to see if there's any questions or comments from folks in the audience or online. Yes, great. Give me 2 seconds. We got 2 questions. See, don't go nowhere.
Okay, I'm here.
Question 1.
Hi. You said, I have 2 questions. You said something about if you're from a qualified group for a certain amount of equipment, so it's not really individual.
No, the equipment is groups because there's a little bit of liability with loaning people equipment, right?
I don't know.
So we go through, yeah, it's kind of like if you go and rent skis, for cross-country skis, they have you sign a waiver, but we don't have that in place. So the equipment gets loaned to a group that actually does have insurance.
Okay.
And so that makes it a bit easier for RPay.
Okay. And my second thing was about wheelchair accessibility or just that kind of world. And I'm recently coming out of it, and I still don't see any of it.
Yeah, so we're just adding, actually we put in, I don't know if we will or not, but we put an application into Lotteries Yukon to add some, they're like adaptive sleds to the lending library, and the kick sleds are really great because we've got the ability to put on armrests and also seat belts if you need it, things like that to make it adaptive. If you're interested though in wheelchair and physical activity, Yukon Government Sport and Recreation Branch has about 25 adaptive wheelchairs that you can get them to come to your group or your community and do programming as well. And so that would be, if anyone's interested in that, her name's Jana Tate, who you would connect with for that.
Great. I've got a question from the amazing Dennis of Amazing Mayo.
That was an amazing presentation.
Thank you, Dennis.
In Mayo, we have a lot of outdoor spaces, outdoor swimming pool. We got a little tiny skateboard park. We've got the gem of the Yukon, the 5 Mile Lake. We have all these resources, but it's trying to encourage the parents to come out and then be active, and we're really struggling with that. And it's like, how do you get the parents involved? The kids want to come out and do it, but they have to have parental guardian when we do these outdoors activities. And so our struggle is with the parents. And we've even offered, we have a full facility gym in Mayo. It's a $50 a year membership. And we've offered to cover that membership. I've had 2 people sign up so far. And I'm just like, how do you get the people out and involved and encouraged? Like, I can't run around and knock on doors all the time. And I'm glad the first question came up about equipment, because one of the things we want to do is purchase a mobile gym. So people that need to do some rehab at home, they don't want to do it in the facility, but we want them to be able to do it actively in their homes. Would RPay assist with something like that?
Well, actually, RPay was thinking about doing a home-based, like a program around home-based exercise and things like that. So RPay is one source, but for rehabilitation, Yukon Chronic Conditions has a free referral program for people in communities, and they'll connect with you by telehealth. So either RPay or Chronic Conditions that's based out of the old Canadian Tire building.
Dennis just making me work.
It's called
physical activity.
Like in one incident, we have an individual who cannot have surgery done until they lose a certain amount of weight. So this person does not want to go to the gym, but is willing to do that at home. So we want to assist them. And we also have a trainer in town who's willing to come and assist as well, so that this person is going to do it properly without injuring themselves. So
let's talk, because I got a couple of options for you, but I know that we're on a little bit of a time zone. But can I just take 1 minute to answer his first question? Because I think it's really applicable to everybody here, is how do we get adults engaged with kids? So I've heard through the training program that I deliver, I've had more than 250 people from all 3 territories participate. It is hard to get adults out. So what I hear from people is things like special events work really well. In Nunavut, they have Christmas games that run the entire month of December, and that gets lots of people out. So it seems to be those special community events that bring people together, not the regular programming so much. But also those spaces when you can start to find ways to, say, put a fire pit with a coffee pot or something like that, or a picnic shelter, or a barbecue or something. Then you're going to get the adults coming, the kids can play, and the adults are there as well. So I think that there's a number of different ways, but we so need to do that more. And from a policy perspective, we need to make sure that funding is not just for kids and youth programs, but that funding's available for everybody of every age, because we can't set an example for our children and youth if we don't participate. So thanks for that, Dennis.
Thanks, Caroline. Oh, I've got one question, and then we've got, sorry, Anne. It's so hard to say no to elders. I'm so sorry.
I'll come over there afterwards.
Number one, because we've got our hand games. Do you want to give up your question? Now I'll put you on the spot. You're okay? Okay.
Masicho, my name's Ashley. I'm an elder support worker. So I notice a lot in your language that you use the difference between Whitehorse people and rural citizens. Now I'm curious about specifically elders and people with disabilities who are from the communities originally. They're still members of that specific community, but they're displaced, and so they may not have access to the programs in Whitehorse because they're not members of the area here. So I'm just curious, where would they fit into renting programs or different, because they technically are from rural and that's where their support is, but they live here.
So reach out to RPAY, because RPAY is a nonprofit, so we don't have a black and white side. There's a lot of gray area in there. And so, we've had lots of different groups and communities, like the Therapeutic Riding Association works with RPAY. They're based out of Whitehorse, right? So come and speak to RPAY. Anne Morgan, some of you might know her. She's the executive director. She also owns the Caribou Hotel in Carcross, and she's a longtime Yukoner. She's very, very flexible. You just come and share your story, explain what your need is, and we can usually move things around to make it work, because you're right. We don't want to leave anybody out, and sometimes those people are the ones that need the support the most. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Caroline. Big round of applause for Caroline. Thank you.